With a timeline loosely set for quarterback Derek Carr to make his decision, there are a lot of arguments for and against the idea that he's the best fit for the New Orleans Saints. But are the New Orleans Saints the best fit for Derek Carr? We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget we're free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we'll wrap up the show being joined by Darian Gray of Locked On HBCU, who's come to bring us some good fits for the New Orleans Saints from the HBCU Legacy Bowl as we kick off our collegiate series of all of our Locked On college hosts coming over to talk about some of their potential fits for the New Orleans Saints. We'll also take a look at combine workouts and drills, which ones specifically you should be watching for positions of need during the combine this week and why. But first, Derek Carr. So we're back on the Derek Carr Chronicles here. And the reason why is because we got a bit of an update here as Derek Carr is going to be kind of treating the NFL Combine as a little bit of a job fair for him. And honestly, this is wise. It's a place where he can go and meet with several teams. And one of the pieces that has come out about that is that Derek Carr is expected to meet with the New Orleans Saints as well as the New York Jets for a second time. And of course, also meet with the Carolina Panthers. There is also a loose timeline out there. Now, we'll get to that here in just a second. But what do you think the biggest factor is for Derek Carr in free agency? I think a lot of us would say financials, money, contract, all of those things. Well, according to Mike Garofalo over at NFL Network, it's actually about team fit first. Now, let's not fool ourselves here, right? Money, financials, contract, those are always going to be a huge part about any decision that any free agent makes to stay in a place or accept a contract in a new place. That's just kind of how the NFL works. It is a business after all. These are these people's jobs and livelihood. So it does, though, beg the question, are the New Orleans Saints the best fit? We'll start with those three teams, the Saints, the Jets, and the Panthers, out of that collection. And I think it's hard to argue that they aren't. I'll tell you why. The first of which is, of course, the connection to Dennis Allen, right? That's a big piece of it. You have the connection to Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen drafted him, not only drafted him in 2014, but started him as a rookie day one. Has clearly shown a lot of belief in Derek Carr. The New Orleans Saints were the only team that were granted permission by Derek Carr and the Las Vegas Raiders to explore the idea of a trade. Ultimately, that trade did not happen. Derek Carr very likely not trying to give the Raiders any trade compensation back after how they did them. But the connection very much there with Dennis Allen. I also think there's a scheme fit and things like that. And I also think that the city of New Orleans as a whole is a fit. So what makes the Carolina Panthers and the New York Jets not a fit? Well, that two separate situations here. The Carolina Panthers have a top 10 draft pick in this year's draft. And very likely, and I mean, you look at the staff that they built with Frank Reich and all the folks that they built that are all these kind of premier developers. It seems pretty clear that the Carolina Panthers are perfectly happy going with a young quarterback in this year's draft. Maybe Matt Corral gets a little bit of love. We'll see. That wasn't that that coaching staff's draft pick, though. So does Derek Carr really want to go to a place where not only is a first round pick, but a top 10 pick in particular, considering that the Carolina Panthers could also trade up, could be a top 5 pick, could be a top 3 pick by the time that we're done. The Arizona Cardinals are rumored to be looking at potentially trading back. The Chicago Bears are apparently listening to offers about pick number 1. If that ends up happening, the Houston Texans could be looking to move up to 1. Does that give the Bears the opportunity to move back twice? Like, there's a whole bunch of weird scenarios that can happen out of all this. And so does Derek Carr really want to be in a place where not only would you have a potential first round pick, not only would you have a potential top 10 selection, but you would also have somebody that this organization could potentially give up assets for to move up and draft, breathing down your neck day one? I don't know if that's really a situation that Derek Carr wants to be in, knowing that he's 30 years old or at that point, right? He's at that threshold of 30 plus. And I mean, you don't want to have that young guy breathing down your neck right there from day one. On the opposite side, or with the other team, the New York Jets, I think there's a couple of different things there. But what I will mention about the New York Jets is that the New York Jets have been pretty loud about how great their meetings have been with Derek Carr and how they think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and all these other things. A lot of air quotes that I'm using heavily and all of that because the New York Jets is kind of being very loud about their meetings with Derek Carr. You've noticed that the New Orleans Saints haven't been, right? Saints haven't held press conferences to talk about their time with Derek Carr and all these other things. They aren't singing it from the mountains. So why are the New York Jets? Well, the New York Jets could be doing that as a signal or a shot across the bow to bow, shot across the bow, shot across the bow, shot across the bow, shot across the bow to Aaron Rodgers, who's in a cave somewhere, underground somewhere, whatever, trying to make a decision about what his future looks like, whether it's with the Green Bay Packers or otherwise. And the New York Jets are just out there kind of loudly screaming, "We're okay with Derek Carr, Aaron. We're not worried about you." When really they're very worried about Aaron. So for the Saints, how do they differ between those two situations? Well, the Saints could draft, there's more and more chatter, like Daniel Jeremiah, Pat McAfee, all these guys talking about the Saints and the fit for Hendon Hooker, right? But that's at the bottom of the first round, potentially top of the second round. Not a guy that's going to immediately threaten you if you're Derek Carr. Derek Carr's probably still got another contract after this. So getting multiple years in New Orleans wouldn't be a bad situation for him. So it's not the same type of, breathing, getting your neck breathed down when it comes to that rookie quarterback. The other side, when it comes to the New York Jets, is that the Saints clearly view Derek Carr as their top option. And so with that being the case, it's not the same situation as what you're seeing with the New York Jets. And now if you're asking me like city fit, I've been to Fresno. I've spent a lot of time in Fresno. I've spent a lot of time in New York City as well. I used to live in both of those places, or I've spent, I've lived in both of those places for extended amounts of time. They are not the same. I look at New Orleans as a city and as an environment as a better fit for Derek Carr than New York/New Jersey, right? We got to talk about both of those when it comes to the New York Jets. So I do think that there's, even outside of the scheme fit, which, look, West Coast, Air Coryell type blend offense that wants to be able to run the ball, that has that has a really good defense and a great defensive mind. And don't get me wrong, the Jets have some of those pieces as well, right? They're probably in a better situation in the run game right now than the Saints are, since there's a mystery around what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara in 2023. They're both defensive head coaches, but the Saints have the connection with their defensive head coach to Derek Carr. So I do think that there's a lot of reasons to say that the New Orleans Saints are the best fit for Derek Carr. Whether or not Derek Carr is the best fit for the New Orleans Saints, you got to get out on the field and figure that out. So just an update on the timeline in terms of where we are, though. According to Garofalo on NFL Network, Derek Carr wants to make his decision between now and March 13th. So effectively in the next 2 weeks. Why March 13th? That's when the negotiating period, or as we colloquially call it, the legal tampering period for the NFL free agency period, which officially begins in earnest on March 15th. March 13th is when that negotiating period begins. So it gives him an opportunity to be out there kind of on his own. Yeah, Carson Wentz got released, but Marcus Mariota got released, but right? Derek Carr is kind of out there in a class of his own amongst these, free agent quarterbacks that are presently available, these street free agents that are available. And so he kind of gets to dictate his own thing. So are the Saints the best fit? I think there are arguments to be made there. Are the Saints going to give him the best contract? That part we'll have to see. But even if fit is most important, and reportedly the financial conversations haven't even started yet, even if fit is most important, let's not pretend like money won't be a huge part of this factor as well, because where there's more money, there's probably a better fit there too. And the Saints can provide both of those things. Coming up next, positions of need for the New Orleans Saints and what specific drills, workouts, what's the difference between the two, and why you should care. You should be watching throughout the NFL Combine. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the premier and best sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. And right now, it's we're halfway through the NBA season, the second half post All-Star break getting started. So there's a ton of things for you to get in on when it comes to NBA odds. But don't forget, there's NFL odds that are out there. You can already get in on futures for next year. There's probably going to be some draft odds that are going to come out as well. So there's a ton for you to check out over at FanDuel today. And if you're a new customer, it gets even better for you. Why? Because we have a no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 for first time users. That's bonus bets that you can get back if your first bet doesn't win, which means that there's no losing. All you have to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Get started. You can start betting on money line, spreads, point point scores, threes drained, when the football season rolls around, touchdown scores, final scores, all those other things, over, unders, all that good stuff you can get in on. But you don't want to miss out on those, on that no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets. So to get that, head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Every Wednesday, I like to do a little segment that I call Midweek Fundamentals. And we kind of change the theme of this as the NFL offseason calendar moves through its phases. So eventually we'll look at things like contracts, dead money, what are void years, how do you restructure contracts, what are average salaries for this, that, and the other. We'll look at all that once we get to free agency. In the draft, we'll take a look at the draft charts and value charts and all those things. As we get in the training camp and offseason workouts, we'll start looking at schemes and what is the difference between cover one, cover two. We'll look at all the sort of the basic coverage schemes, route trees, all those other things. Right now, what I want to focus on with the combine coming around is drills, right? And really it's drills and workouts. And I'll explain to you the difference between the two here in just a moment. But basically what this segment is all about is helping you sort of pinpoint what drills and workouts matter for each position of need for the New Orleans Saints. So we've got the three top positions of need for New Orleans. One of them is kind of a little bit dual meaning there. And so we'll go through all those and I'll tell you which drills and workouts you're going to be looking at. So I appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. So let's start off with the difference between drills and workouts. So workouts usually refers to, and this is a little colloquial, so some people might have like different definitions and things like that. So really what I'm doing is putting in the framework how I'm going to delineate between the two, right? So this isn't a hard and fast rule. This is just something that like I'm doing for the show here. So when I'm talking about workouts, what I'm really looking at are the ones that you're most accustomed to and know the names of: 40-yard dash, 3-cone drill, broad jump, vertical leap, bench press, those things. To me, those things, for this purpose, we're gonna focus on those being called workouts. And that's how I delineate them as we go through draft process and all these other things as well. Drills, on the other hand, are things where you see players working with trainers and coaches on the field, oftentimes called on-field workouts or on-field drills. I use the word drills for these because these are the things that get drilled during practice. So this means like throwing on air or routes on air, the gauntlet where you see the wide receivers like catch, turn, catch, run, catch, do all those things. Coverage drills where you see, DBs transitioning from backpedal to, sprinting, sprinting upfield, change of direction drills where you see the trainer kind of pointing with the ball where they want the linebacker to go and change of all those other things, right? So for me, like those things are drills. The workouts are the things you know the names to: 40-yard dash, all those other things. Now, do either tell the full story of a player? Absolutely not, right? But some are more helpful than others. And remember that a huge part of what the combine presents for draft prospects goes unseen by the public eye, goes unseen by media. It's team interviews, right? It's picking the brain of those players and things like that. So there's so many things that all have to come together. Every team values different things differently and all of that. So what are we looking for when we're watching the drills, when we're doing the media interviews, when you're watching on television, things like that? That's what we're going to be looking at today for the Saints' biggest needs. And I'm going to focus on three for this: quarterback, defensive line. And defensive line is the one that I mentioned that's going to kind of be a two-parter. We'll look at interior defensive line as well as edge rusher. And then we'll wrap up with running back. And this is going to fly by pretty quickly, but pretty simple stuff here. Quarterbacks, what you're really looking for the most part, are the on-field drills, not necessarily the workouts. Now, don't get me wrong. A 40-yard dash time for a quarterback can be a lot of fun. A vertical leap for a quarterback can be a lot of fun, all of those things. But oftentimes now you're seeing more and more quarterbacks skip out on the workouts, but then take part in the on-field drills. Now, for a quarterback like Hendon Hooker, he'll do neither, right? Because he's recovering from his injury, all those other things, but he'll still do his team interviews and things like that. So there's still some value here for Hendon Hooker, who I know is a lot of New Orleans Saints fans' favorite quarterback prospect in range of the New Orleans Saints, mine as well. So while those workouts can be a lot of fun for quarterbacks, what you're really looking for are those on-field drills, and then watch the media interviews, because the media interviews give you a little bit, the questions aren't going to be as in-depth as what they get in the team interviews by any stretch of the imagination, right? And In the team drills, they're drilling playbooks, they're drilling schemes, they're drilling if you see this, then you do what, all those other things. You're not going to get that in the media interviews, but it does give you a little bit of a preview in terms of that player's personality, culture fit. You know your team better than anybody else, your favorite team. How does that player's attitude fit with the players that you know and love? All of those things. So those are kind of the big things that you're going to be watching. Those on-field drills give you an opportunity to see ball placement. They give you an opportunity to see anticipation, give you an opportunity to see them work with coaches, things like that. The workouts like the 40-yard dash, bench press, all those things, with the quarterback position, you can kind of leave those out. Not necessarily leave them out, but maybe they don't carry the same weight. Interior defensive line, what you're going to be looking for is the initial explosion in the 40-yard dash, but you're also looking for other explosive measurements, vertical leap, broad jump. All of those things give you a really good opportunity to sort of see what translates in terms of burst and explosion off the line of scrimmage. You also see that in the on-field drills that they'll run with that position group as well. So 3-cone, change of direction, things like that. You might be able to glean some good stuff from there. But just in terms of casually viewing and understanding, like, okay, what am I trying to pick out from this? That explosiveness off the line of scrimmage is really one of those big things that you're going to be looking for. And again, there are other contextual things with the other drills. Don't get me wrong. None of it's useless, but those are maybe some of the bigger drills that you're looking for. For the edge class, which is a place where the Saints can use some help or use more bodies, right? More efficient edge rushers. 10-second split in the 40-yard dash. Think about Will Anderson, for instance. I believe, if I recall correctly, from Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez over at Locked On NFL Draft, they mentioned that Will Anderson has one of Alabama's fastest 10-yard splits. So that's the first 10 yards in a 40-yard dash. How long? How is that timed? He had one of the fastest ones behind only wide receiver Jalen Waddle. So that's going to be a really impressive thing to watch. How quickly does Will Anderson get off the line? How quickly does he get through those first 10 yards? And the reason why you look at the 10-yard split as opposed to the 40-yard split is ideally, no edge rusher is running 40 yards downfield to get after a quarterback, but 10 yards, sure, right? Within the first 10 yards, absolutely. So you're looking at that. You're looking at broad jump and vertical as well, because you want to see that explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. Same thing as the interior. So you're looking at burst, how quickly they can get off the snap, all of those things, how quickly they can get up to speed, maintain that speed, those pieces. And also pay attention to the new hoop drill. That's the one with the two basically big things on the ground that look like hula hoops. And there's a tennis ball placed, and they're kind of running through the figure eight, and they're picking up, scooping up the tennis ball as they're doing that. What that shows you is their ability, their body control, their ability to bend off the edge, and their sort of burst around a corner. So and their flexation as well, right? Being able to get all the way down and pick up that tennis ball without losing momentum while changing direction, all of those things. That's a really, really fun one that they added here recently as a part of the Combine Reimagined initiative, where you're kind of looking at, okay, so what are the actual things that these players can do in these drills, or workouts that translate to the field? Because 40-yard dashes don't always translate to the field, depending upon what position you play. But something like that definitely does. And edge rusher is a big one to watch for that. And finally, running back. Here's one where you're watching the 40, right? You want to see the speed, but you're also looking at broad jump. You're also looking at vertical. You're looking at 3-cone as well. So those first 340, broad jump, vertical, give you an idea of speed, explosiveness, burst, all of those things, which you love to see, of course, from a running back. But you also want to pay attention to the 3-cone drill because it shows their ability to change direction, their ability to, the short area quickness, all of those things. So those all factor in, particularly with those smaller, shiftier running backs. But if you get a big bruising running back that changes direction really well, there's another level to that game. Speaking of another level to that game, receiving drills in terms of the on-field drills are a pretty good one to keep an eye out on as well to see what kind of value these running backs could bring in the passing game. Finally, the Saints could potentially look to keep an eye on cornerback, and there's something really specific here. So I would say the 3-cone drill becomes pretty important, not necessarily for the outside corners, but because the Saints could be looking for a slot corner or a slot safety in this year's NFL draft. Being able to see sort of short area quickness, ability to change direction, burst in the short area translates pretty well to the field through that drill based on their ability to be able to work in congested areas, things like that. The other piece is ball tracking, change of direction, on-field drills that will also give you a good perception into what those players could bring to the field. So those are some of the big drills to watch, and specifically which ones matter. Not more than others, not most or anything like that, but it's kind of where you can glean a little bit more context from those individual drills and workouts for some of the most important positions that the Saints should be looking at in this year's NFL draft. Coming up next, we've got Darian Gray here from Locked On HBCU to kind of walk us through 4 potential prospects that competed and stood out in the HBCU Legacy Bowl and how they could potentially fit with the New Orleans Saints. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrap it up today's episode of Locked On Saints with Darian Gray from Locked On HBCU. You can follow him on Twitter at South Exclusives. And of course, you can find him on the Locked On HBCU podcast every Monday through Friday. Darian is here to talk through some of the biggest performers in the HBCU Legacy Bowl and how they could potentially fit with the Saints. As a part of our series, as we'll visit with several of our college shows here on the network to take a look at where some of the overlap or maybe some of those young players could stand out and be fits for New Orleans. I started with Darian because he's a Saints fan, so I wanted to just show him some love. And we'll start off here by speaking on a wide receiver that doesn't necessarily match the frame that the New Orleans Saints usually go for in terms of the prototype, but does fit the mold of somebody that we've seen find success in New Orleans very, very recently.
Xavier Smith to the Saints is a hope. It's a project. It's a desire that doesn't quite fit what the Saints do right now with their offense, but he does fit the role of returner. See, the reason I say he doesn't fit the offense is because he's 5'9". He's 170 pounds. He's not a big guy. He's not the contested wide receiver that a lot of people are looking for, but he's also not a first round, second round, third round pick. Right. So by that time, you would hope that the big receiver role had already been filled. But at the same time, I think that Xavier Smith is the type of player that elite offenses know how to deploy in today's NFL because he can play in the backfield if you need him to be. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. He's a versatile piece. I know his size doesn't allow him to be elite outside, and he's not a running back, but it does allow him to be one of the quicker, more shiftier players at those positions. Where he would fit with New Orleans right now, without a scheme change, is as the punt returner, the kick returner, because despite his size, he has good ball tracking. He has good poise in the midst of chaos, and he has good open field running skills. Well, that good sounds for a returner. Like a returner. That's what it sounds like. He just shows it as a wide receiver, and he has returned before. With Rashid Shaheed taking on a bigger role, which we all assume he will in the offense, I think that he should have a lesser role on special teams, which leaves that open. And I'll leave it like this. The Saints love their prototypes, and that's the reason Jason Dumas isn't on this list, because of prototypes and size stereotypes and things of that nature. Well, Deontay Hardy was brought in to be the kick returner, punt returner at 5'6". Yep. When Deontay Hardy was thrown into the offense, because that's not what I believe they wanted to do, but when he was thrown into the offense, he had a pretty good year with Jameis at the start of 2021. And I think that Xavier Smith has the type of skill set that could have the same unexpected success.
Comes in underneath big time all of the Saints sort of prototypes and all those things. But I don't want to write him off completely because like Kalijah Kancey coming out of Pittsburgh is one of my favorite guys. If there's somebody that's talented enough to break the mold, there's somebody that's talented enough to break the mold. And that could be Xavier Smith's situation coming out of FAMU. But if you want somebody that already checks the boxes in terms of the prototype, there's another guy right next to that dude over in Southern who could potentially stay here in state and have an immediate impact.
Cam Peterson, I really like Cam Peterson. He's somebody that we both liked at the Legacy Bowl, and Dumas won the MVP. But that defensive line for Team Robinson was destructive all day. And in the second half, it actually surprised me that Cam Peterson got his first sack of the day because he was so disruptive. So whether you're talking about pressures, obviously it wasn't sacks, but then you also had tackles for a loss in the running game. So he was doing everything as well as getting his hands up, getting pass deflections. The Saints only had one defensive tackle with more than one pass deflection, and that was Shai Tuttle last year. And they just need to restock the position, period. And I don't care if you draft first round, you love your UDFA defensive tackles. That shouldn't be the only way you go. But if you do go there, which you should, because you just need to replenish the talent, I think that Cam Peterson is a good person to have. He has speed. He has power. The Saints love their power, but they need to get to the passer a little bit quicker at times. And I think that he can have both of those. So he gives what the Saints like to have, but then he also gives what the Saints need to have. And I'll share you one story. At the Legacy Bowl practices, I guess he was either trying to work exclusively outside or he was trying to show his versatility on the edge as well. But nobody wanted to compete inside. This is what I heard on the field. Nobody really wanted to compete inside. So what did Cam Peterson do? He said, I'm going to go ahead and go inside. And that's the type of mentality that I'm a want. Y'all scared? Nah, not me. I'm going to go ahead and move inside. I'm going to go ahead and dominate inside. And that's exactly what he did on Saturday.
Yeah, he was an absolute wrecking ball that entire game. You and I sat next to each other in the press box, which was a ton of fun, by the way. And we were sitting there watching.
You made that J. Cole comment.
Listen, yes. J. Cole's not good. I'm sorry. And that's fine. But we'll talk about that another time. We'll come up with another podcast where we can have that discussion. But when it comes to the comments are about to be wild now because I said that out loud. But Cam Peterson did have a sack in the first half, which is why we were so surprised that he didn't get his first real sack into the second half, because the first half he got a hold of the face mask of the quarterback. Yes. But that swim move that he used to win immediately off the line of scrimmage, that's hard to miss. And he did that with power. He did that with speed. He did it with finesse. He did it all kinds of different ways. Now, there were a couple of guys on the offensive line. Defensive line were of course, was extremely strong, particularly for Team Robinson up against in the Legacy Bowl a couple days ago. But there were also some offensive linemen that impressed you as well.
There were, and these guys are partially because of the one-on-ones, partially because I know who they were coming into the game, and we're focusing on players who were there at the game. Wasn't the best showing, of course, for the offensive linemen on the day. I think there's a couple of reasons for that, I would assume, because these guys are just that talented. But we saw Robert Mitchell put somebody into the dirt. As soon as I say, hey, Ross, there's this guy 54 Team Gaither. He put the guy into the dirt immediately. And that's the type of guy you can expect. He's a guard out of North Carolina Central who, if you decide to stick with Pete for another year, and that's kind of up in the air, and you just want to get a depth piece, just somebody to be behind Pete who maybe has some potential, I think that Mitchell fits that. But then he also played a little bit of center. He also played a little bit of tackle in one-on-ones, but he is a guard through and through, but he's also played those other positions. That's the connecting value between him and Drake Centers out of Texas Southern, which I'm bummed out I don't have my flag behind.
Texas Southern alum, Darian Gray.
Yes, of course. Centers is a tackle by trade. So you're not bringing him in to start. You are bringing him in to be a swing lineman because he's played on the left. He's played on the right. He's been the emergency center for Texas Southern. No pun intended there.
I know, right?
But he is just a guy who is so versatile, and he brings that to a team that was like the innovator of the versatile swing lineman. He just fits the mold, and I want to continue bringing people in because that's a role that doesn't have much certainty every year. That can change at any time. So you want to continue to bring in competition to see who's going to be your best guy. And I think that Centers and Mitchell could fill that void. I don't even say void, could fill that role.
All right, y'all. One more big shout out to Darian Gray, host of Locked On HBCU. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at South Exclusives. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, it is Thursday, the first day of on-field workouts and drills for defensive line and others when it comes to the NFL Combine. So I'll let you know which players to keep an eye out on, including one of my favorite draft prospects this year. We got all that coming up for you in tomorrow's episode. Appreciate you as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also go and check out for your second listen today, Locked On NFL Draft. They have been previewing every single position of the Combine, and that's going to be performing over at the Combine. Damian Parson, as well as Keith Sanchez, getting you all set up wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks much as always for making me a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. Big shout out to Ventrell, who I met today. Appreciate you saying hi, homie. Thank you very much for the support over here on the show. For everything else you need for your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.